Hi, I'm Cecilia. As you can see from the title, this is a very difficult conversation for me to have. Rather a monologue I'm sharing since, except through comments, you don't really have the chance to converse with me. I am going through a separation from my partner of 15 years. We've been married for 10 and it's a wonderful child. And both of us, I believe, have been pretty satisfied with the way that we have co-parented our child both before and after the split. It was my decision to move out to start a new chapter. And it's an extremely painful process because I believe no one, and myself least of all, would make such a decision lightly. This has been going on for a few months, and I am still very much in the beginning stage of this mourning process. And it's true what they say about grieving. Whether you believe there are actual 7 stages of it, there's a myriad of emotions that we go through, that I am going through. On a weekly basis, I will go from acceptance back to depression, back to denial, and whatever else might come in between. And part of my hesitation of sharing this, as you can imagine, as a therapist who often work with couples, particularly interracial couples, who have been known to have a higher rate of divorce due to the cultural differences and gaps that you have to bridge in the marriage, in addition to all that normally comes in a long-term relationship. There's a lot of shame in accepting that I have failed in this process. Of course, it might not be cognitively rational, it might be one of those CBT distortion to think of it as a failure. And in my better moments, I don't think of it as a failure, and I still immensely cherish what we've been through, and a part of me really appreciate and still have a lot of love for my partner, because we're still working on, and will be working on for the rest of our lives, on our biggest joint project, which is our rearing our child. But the emotional impact is such that I have not made it work. And of course, as a couple therapist, that's something, at least at a superficial level, embarrassing to admit. Even though we all know that a doctor shouldn't be embarrassed for getting sick, him or herself. In a similar vein, as a therapist, I shouldn't be surprised that I will have difficulties in managing my relationships and not be 100% fully emotionally regulated all the time. And it's only in having taken really close to 6 months to come to terms with this reality. And by coming to terms, meaning accepting it at a cognitive level, but still mourning it very much in that process I just described, and going ups and down, that I've decided that to take one more step of my own endeavor to be more vulnerable and to be authentic, and to also role model, as I often say, that one of the most important process of healing and therapy or coaching, or even in parenting, is to model what we want to see in our child or client or our friends and families. So I want to role model my, perhaps at least an attempt to be more open about the kind of pain and suffering I'm going through in this process. To ask who was to blame is really always besides the point, because the answer is almost always we each take part in what worked and what didn't work. Even if on the outset we have an intense emotional reaction to what we might not have gotten, received, or longed to have from the other person that might have been missing and in the end eventuated or resulted in the separation. And by the way, you're hearing my dog in my new apartment back there. I was finally able to transport both of my very senior dogs from the States to where I am in China so that they can spend a few remaining years with me. This was a decision made long before the separation became true, but it really turned out to be good timing because they've been an immense therapeutic value for me. So, one of the key theme that I feel like has been happening in this process is this idea of loss. Losing a relationship is more than just the status or the title of being married and being with someone, but it's also this physical process of loss. In many ways, the pain and loneliness that I feel at times is really missing a part of a ensemble and a physical combination of two people being in the same place. And even if not talking, there's a certain connection, certain attachment you form after many years together. In fact, in my study to self-heal and connect with my feelings in the process of healing, I realized how much this resembled that very original separation that we have with our parents. And there's so much of that attachment, or even the pattern of attachment, we project onto our partner, our spouse, or long-term lover that is very unconscious. And it's in retrospect that I realize how much I have projected the kind of attachment I've had partially with mom and partially with dad, and how much of that might have been problematic and how much of that was my own unconscious effort to heal. And some of that was genuinely what I deserve from a partner, and some of that might have been perhaps too much for anybody to take. But back to this idea of loss, that to feel the visceral pain, the kind that makes it almost hard to breathe, so that we would instinctually do anything we can to avoid feeling that, because it's a matter of survival to be able to breathe. So there are times when I am in denial of something I've chosen, and I would actually feel emotionally abandoned because of certain connection I was missing in this partnership. And in those moments, I try to come up with any reason or ways we could still remedy this, and I could still, in some ways, poke at my partner to see if he's willing to give me what I've wanted all along, even though that has been a process we have tried for years, and ultimately we can't change each other. We have no right to change the other person, but only to respect and accept what we can and to leave what we can't. So this theme of loss has really compounded with other losses that many of us, unfortunately, and typically go through in midlife. Now in my mid-40s, I have lost my mom a few years ago, and this summer I went back to my dad's house to help clear all the things I've left that he has never been able to bring himself to clear out. And so much of that physical presence of those materials and things my mom left, most of it has no financial value, but held such emotional weight for the family that I saw in some way that I was letting go of some of that emotional baggage by clearing it out. Because now that my father is also aging in such a way that it's not healthy or even possibly safe for him to be by himself, that he has been placed with relatives so that he could be better off and actually not have to live alone. Particularly growing up in an Asian culture where community is very much part of who we are and how we grew up and how we survive a lot of the poverty, crisis, immigration, discrimination, that being alone can be especially challenging. Even though I often work with Asian clients or first generation Asian immigrant clients to set healthier boundaries with their family, but there's no denying that the connection, particularly when we have learned to set boundaries, can serve such emotional benefit, such support, and reduce loneliness. So now as I learn to be spending more time alone, as I do split the childcare with my partner, I've begun to see how much I have in the past given myself into the domestic caretaking, not just the physical aspect, but the emotional overfunctioning, the feeling things, so that that void of resulted from the suppression of feelings is not so such a gaping hole in the family. Of course, that's my need to feel connected, and that's why I'm in this profession. But now that I have freed myself from that overfunctioning, that I have not just observed in myself, of course, but in so many women in the course of their long-term relationship, and also in some of the more minority, sensitive, emotionally present men, that I can now reclaim some of that space and energy to be fully present for myself. And that's something I really could not have done if I have not come to accept this is a necessary loss by setting the boundary for not staying in a place where I do not have the opportunity to fulfill my need. Even if that need might not necessarily be the full responsibility of that partner, to live with a mismatch of what is important for our growth, to live with a void that feels so much more painful for one versus the other is not fair on both sides. And as you hear more of the pitter patter of my canine companionship in the background, I guess along with that loss, I'm also recognizing the gain of so many partners who, once they have decided to leave a less than a compatible relationship, to be able to reclaim some of that space and to grow themselves. And it's no surprise that those partners tend to say their careers, their own projects get a lift after that split. And that's not in any way to put down or berate the previous partners in having been an important part of their life, but to simply emphasize how much positive we each can have despite the prospect of being alone and how painful that can be in the transition process. And really just sharing this with you really brings a sense of peace in my body that can be hard to maintain this last few months, despite the fact that feeling more accurate pain a rather acute pain, has really allowed me to stay more present and sharper in my work with my clients, and to be able to feel them and empathize with what they might be going through, regardless if it's in any way similar to what I'm dealing with. And it has really enhanced my work and has brought more energy to my work. And it's really my fortune that I found that I have not in any way, despite the pain and the mourning I go through, I have no way in any measure lost interest in my work. I'm still energized. In fact, I always leave my session feeling more physically energized and emotionally fulfilled by being there for my clients, by making it not about myself ever, of course, but to be fully connected, to be with them and present in their issue. And most of them, in fact, I would say all of them, have no idea what I'm going through. And part of my hesitation is to share this, is to be afraid that some of my clients, if they do see this, will want to take care of me. And as one writer in my field has said, the best way our clients take care of our pain is by letting us do our job, because that's how we take care of ourselves. So the loss, the mourning, and the emotional regulation will be some of the key tasks in this period. While I continue to see clients, in fact, see more clients than I used to, I do find that in the times I don't see clients, there are more fatigue. There are times where I feel I want to take mini naps more than I used to. And although I tend to feel a lot of guilt in taking these little breaks out of my perfectionist or workaholic tendency, I become very mindful of the fact that processing grief and feeling all of this vulnerability takes enormous energy. Just as I often normalize the fact that my clients with huge amount of anxiety or long-term depression can feel fatigue simply because those symptoms are consuming energy. So I am sharing that I do allow myself to take more breaks from my writing, from making videos, for example, because I know that in order to even provide the contents that I genuinely want to share, I must first take that time to connect with myself, to allow my body to have the space to heal and feel. And some you might wonder, what does it mean to actually feel our feelings? And this is something that I have been so appreciative of the therapists and the coaches I've worked with, because over the years, through a combination of their guidance and of course my own willingness to move in the direction of mindfulness, that it's through that long-term practice, not necessarily the extensive 20-minute sit down every day, because let's face it, a lot of us simply don't have the luxury to do that every day. But it's through the 5-minute here, 3-minute there, and sometimes 20 minutes over there when I do my online meditation room practice, being present with everyone, and being accepting just whatever is happening in the moment, whether it's joy, stress, frustration, fear, or in my present moment, a lot of pain and loneliness. And of course, shame, at times feeling that I'm not able to be more in control of the situation, even though no one really can. So this mindfulness that have really helped me be present is one that is constantly at the back of my head, or maybe more accurately inside my body. So in moments where I feel lost, in moments I have this yearning to do whatever I can to fill that gaping hole of missing someone by making compromise or taking back steps that I've taken, I immediately I'm reminded to go inside myself. And what I specifically mean by that is I would sit on my couch and I would face a direction that usually give me some light, like now I'm facing the building, my window in the living room, and to allow some elements of nature to be connecting to me if I don't have the luxury of going outside or sitting on the lawn sometimes. But to be sitting here and to allow myself to be in the quietness of it all so that there's no distraction from what is going on inside. So that I would, and as I usually do, close my eyes so that I can be in touch with that internal weather. And that's really what it is. Our feelings, our moods, our internal weather. And usually we don't have much time to be dedicated to observing that weather, even though we might check our weather app all the time just to see what we can do today and what time I can take my dogs for a walk. So I would sit on my couch and I would allow myself to really just lean into the feeling that's coming up. And usually I begin by scanning our body and focusing on my breath and then allowing all the thoughts, regardless if they're right thoughts, rational thoughts, hateful thoughts, negative thoughts, hopeful ones, all of them are welcomed because I have the safety that I am contained in my space and I'm not going to act them out because I'm giving myself the time to feel them, to separate the fear of doing something wrong from the permission to simply feel them. So it's in those moments I allow myself to have words I want to express to my partner that I'm no longer able to or feel safe to express, or that he's no longer available or willing to receive. Then I allow myself to be my own audience. I allow myself to process the grief by sharing those words with my inner weather and feelings and allow them to come out. And as you have undoubtedly observed that throughout this, what has become a much longer conversation than I anticipate, which seemed to be a theme in my life, I tend to be able to go on much longer than I thought I was capable of, at least outside the therapy room, because that's when I really do need to shut up and listen. But since I am gifted with the ability to share and to articulate, I use that within myself to feel those emotions. And as you can see, my tears, as I was saying earlier and got distracted, do come out, do well up. And because I've been going through this process of connecting with the feeling, with whatever flavor of it, and there's so many possibility feelings that I can't possibly name them all, but there are hundreds of ways of naming feelings, and I probably only really know 10 or 20 of them. And I feel them, and usually they will come out in tears, they will come out in a lot of even further, deeper connection of those feelings of sadness, regret, shame, embarrassment, but also pride that I am able to go through this and bravely connect with them without avoiding what is going on. And in the first couple months, honestly, the emotions will come up in really heaving sobs that I rarely had in the past when I was in a calmer space or more connected space with my partner. And I would just allow those tears to flow. And perhaps it's the limit of my vulnerability, that I'm not able to do it on the video because there's so much of talking that really activates a certain defense system, that I've been educated to say this is what's presentable and how much tears is really allowed in the space. So that's something that's been not just on my mind, but filling my entire body. And I think I will stop here, because this is not a once and for all and somehow that I process once and everything will be okay kind of journey. I want to be able to continue to share this journey with you, but of course, along with other things that I continue to work on and explore and journal about and make videos about, that enhance our emotional health and enhance ultimately our ability not to avoid all crises or difficulties in life, because as we all know, we cannot control what happens to us. And even in this case, when I had 50% control of my relationship, I ultimately cannot control the outcome when it requires the joint effort and comfort of another person. So I want to let you see that we all go through these moments. Expert psychologists or counselors or celebrities, as we now begin to see more of them be able to show their vulnerability. And I believe the more we're able to allow each other to see this, the more we have a joint sense of how normal it is to go through these moments. So in our private moments, we can feel a little bit less alone. And some have said, why do therapists have this need to dwell on these negative feelings? Can't you just redirect and move on? The truth is, that's really what we do most of the times, to redirect our negative emotions and move on to something happier, more positive. And all of that I fully endorse. However, often a lot of the coping mechanisms I found in friends, clients, families, whether it is outbursts, gaming addiction, food addiction, relationship issues, or pornography, substance abuse, all of it has to do with the fact that we have so little tolerance to sit on the sofa and simply give ourselves, even if just 10 minutes, to feel those emotions. Then if we move on to redirecting and focusing on the highlights and the positive to move forward in our life, then we do not allow those negative energies to be trapped and to become a kind of a time bomb that will be due to explode, or in some unconscious way direct our actions for the rest of our lives. Because it's those unconscious motivations that can drive us to repeat unhealthy patterns and form habits that eventually harm us in a grave way, whether it's the ending of our relationship, isolation, heart pressure, illness, that are as a result of those habits. So for the sake of honesty, which I'm a fully believer of, even if sometimes it really hurts and we might make a lot of mistake in doing so, it's always, I believe, better than hiding behind the fear of truth and pretend that everything is okay, or that we're always in a positive mood. I'm willing to sit on the couch and feel those emotions a few minutes at a time, and sometimes a little bit longer than a few minutes, because I know that means for the rest of the day and the week, I'll be much better, authentically, in a happier place. Now, some of you might be curious to how I made the decision to separate when, as a couple therapist, we all believe, even if we never force anyone to stay together, that working towards a relationship goal and harmony, a conflict resolution is always our hope, at least. And that's perhaps something that I'm still working on. And I just know that this was a physical process where I had to really respect that my body was no longer able to tolerate what was missing. And out of respect for both sides, that was, I believe, a courageous decision to make. And perhaps in the future, when I am feeling braver and more clear-headed, I'll be able to share more in some of the reasons and rationale that has driven me to this. But what I can say is that in the end, we're still able to come to this process with civility, courtesy, and trust in sharing, child caring. That's really, I think, the best we can ask for in a very difficult situation. Thank you for being out there and listening, and for giving me this opportunity to share. And I hope that this message brings as much presence with what we feel on a daily basis as hope that all of this is to show that we have the ability to tolerate these feelings without being overwhelmed or taken over. Now, I am getting a little bit taken over by the pitter-pattering in my background because my pug is anxiously pacing, asking me to take her for a walk. So I will do so now so that I can restore a level of peace where I am. Thank you for listening.